A Course in Miracles says that all relationships are assignments. And there are 3 levels of teaching assignments. One is what we perceive to be a casual relationship, a casual encounter. You see somebody in an elevator and you have a choice, you know, are you going to smile and be gracious, or are you going to ignore them? Or I think the example that the Course uses is a child drops their ball in front of you. Are you going to, you know, get out of here, kid? Or are you going to like throw the ball back and say, hey, dude, or whatever? It seems like these are random meetings, but actually they're not. The Course in Miracles says everyone you are supposed to meet you will meet, and everyone you meet you are supposed to meet. Every relationship, and the Course in Miracles says every situation is a relationship, is an opportunity for you to practice honing the musculature of righteous living, what the Course in Miracles calls right-minded. The Course in Miracles talks about right-minded versus wrong-minded. Right-minded means open heart and loving. Wrong-minded means barriers in front of our hearts filled with fear. One is extension, one is projection. The second level of teaching is where people are brought together for a more extended learning opportunity, greater proximity, for a longer period of time. Even here, though, it's very interesting. The Course in Miracles says relationships are of the mind. So when a relationship ends, it doesn't really end. And we know that. You might have been divorced, you might have been broken up, but you're still in somebody's mind. They are still in your mind. So this is another area where form is different than content. But it also means, and we know this from our practical experience, the fact that people broke up or divorced doesn't mean that the relationship was a failure. It just might mean that the maximal growth opportunity that came with proximity, physical proximity, is no longer there. The third level of teaching in Course in Miracles terms is lifelong assignment, but it also reminds us the fact that you have lifelong learning opportunities with someone may or may not mean that you like them. And obviously this would include things like family members. They're there forever in this lifetime. Lifelong set of learning lessons. Now, relationships, the Course in Miracles says, are meant to be holy encounters. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is other people. Yeah, and so is heaven. Hell is what the ego would make of the present moment, the experience of separation we have from other people, which gives us anxiety and depression and guilt and all of that, pain, grief, loss. And heaven, the Course in Miracles says, is not a condition or place, it is an awareness of our oneness. And the purpose of life is to think like God thinks, so that one day we can have heaven on earth. The Course in Miracles says, heaven and earth shall be as one, means they will no longer exist as 2 separate states. And we've all had those moments. The issue is to have them more often. The issue is to get to the point where they are the rule rather than the exception. And of course, you know, it's easy enough when people are behaving the way we would want them to behave and are being nice to us. The growth opportunities, of course, often come when we are triggered into lovelessness, often by someone else's lovelessness, which in a way perfectly matches our own. You're the love addict, they're the love avoidant, or whatever. The Course in Miracles says that every relationship will be either your crucifier, everyone you meet, that is, will be either your crucifier or your savior, depending on what you choose to be to them. The crucifixion is the energy pattern of ego or fear, and salvation is the energy of that which delivers us from those energy patterns of fear to love, which is the miracle. So in relationships, it's just like when, you know, you've got a rough emerald or rough rubies or rough amethyst. How do they get smoothed out? Well, either manually or automatically, they get rubbed up against each other. And that's what relationships are. Your rough edges meet my rough edges. And this is how we are going to smooth it all out. Now, sometimes, just at the point when we have the greatest opportunity to get to that place where we realize my stuff came up, and I have the opportunity to see my stuff, own my stuff, and change, and your stuff came up, and so that I have an opportunity to forgive you and realize how judgmental I get when someone acts that way. The tragedy is how often one, at least one, sometimes both people say, okay, that's it. That's it. I'm out of here. Obviously, this isn't the right relationship. I've certainly seen in my life how, you know, this happens and I go, oh, this is terrible. It's like I feel somebody up there is going, oh, no, this is good. This is good. This is where the learning comes in. And this is often where we need the most faith. You know, it's very trendy today for people to say, well, you know, your eyes met across a crowded room, this enchanted love, and you were so high on each other, and, you know, it was really hot, and that's all great. And then this so-called wisdom says, that's actually just mutual projection, and then ultimately reality will set in. From A Course in Miracles perspective, it's the opposite. When you have those experiences, and I often think of Cupid's arrows, because Cupid didn't shoot his arrows if you didn't meet that person, if your eyes didn't meet, if you didn't have that, like, whoa, who are you? How would you know this is a person with whom you have learning? So something has to like happen to make you know, stop right here. There is learning to do, right? It's a spontaneous enlightenment experience. When you like just see the perfection in another person, that's not projection. It's when we see guilt in another person that's projection. So when we're seeing like I just see how gorgeous you are at the deepest level and you see how gorgeous I am at the deepest level, that's a spontaneous enlightenment experience. It's not that that's the projection and then reality will set in. It's that that's the spontaneous enlightenment and then the illusions and the projections of the world will set in when you see that they leave their clothes on the floor or how they, you know, squeeze the toothpaste or whatever. And that's when the real work begins. But it's really good that you have that enlightenment experience so that you can know, I saw the innocence in this person. And look how tempted we are. No, in no situation are we tempted to all of our ego issues like we are with those people that we often love the most. And it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic. Romantic love is often a place where we experience the most pain and where the most damage is done to society, where the most damage is done to children and so forth. And there are many issues having to do with relationships. There are many good books out there about relationships. I'm particularly enchanted myself by Pat Allen's work. When she says that a man's greatest psychic craving is that his thoughts be respected, and a woman's greatest psychic craving is that her feelings be cherished. I once heard Pat talk about how powerful it is for a woman to say, I feel, and because when she's saying, I feel, we are in our feminine, and how powerful it is when a man says, I think, because he's in his masculine, and how powerful it is for a woman to ask a man, what do you think? And how powerful it is for a man to say, what do you feel? Also, she talks about how important it is at puberty for the mother to be willing to create the space for the individuation of the son, so that, for instance, after puberty, if, let's say, you're a mother of a son, the son is 16 years old, let's say, and he's deciding whether or not to be in a rock and roll band or something, you wouldn't say, what do you feel? You would say to someone, a young man who had passed puberty, what do you think you're going to do? Concomitantly, it is equally important for the father of a daughter to continue to cherish the feelings of the girl after puberty. You know, I was raised in a generation where, with the best of intentions, a lot of parents made mistakes on both sides of that. And my father was one of those fathers who thought he was doing the right thing, you know, slapping me on the back. I'm so proud of you. You can do anything a boy can do, which of course is true, which is good. However, it gave me the core belief that if I achieved enough, I would be loved. I achieved something. Daddy loved me. And we're not loved. The feminine in us is not loved for what we do. The feminine in us is loved for who we are. One of the things Pat Allen says is that two masculines cancel each other out and two feminine cancel each other out. Now, this is not about gay or straight. This is about psychically. So when a woman is in her masculine, a man can't be in his masculine. So if I'm in my masculine, the man can't be in his, either has to give up his masculine or leave. And if he has to give up his masculine, proverbially called give up his balls, he will be angry, whether he expresses it or not. He will just be acquiescing. And there's a problem there. I see a problem with that because it's not so easy for women, particularly when you work. You know, a woman works all day, and in your professional situation, you're in your masculine. The masculine is the giver, the feminine is the receiver. And obviously we're all masculine and we're all feminine, but I always think of men, most men are majoring in masculine and minoring in feminine this lifetime. Most women are majoring in feminine and minoring in masculine. Obviously, particularly today with all the fluidity, et cetera, we all have both aspects. But I agree with Pat Allen that these ambisexual relationships don't work. Somebody has to take that masculine, somebody has to take that feminine as a dominant position, you know, as a dominant rhythm. And one of the things that Pat talks about is that if you really get this settled for about 2 years, then you can relax more into it. But for those 2 years, the idea of who is coming from I think and I want, and who is coming from I feel. She says something fascinating. She says a man says what he wants and a woman says what she doesn't want. So I want to go back for a moment to this business of the woman being at work all day, and we're, you know, having to be in a masculine situation. We're the giver, we're the generator. And then you go to be with your beloved that night, and I know this from my career. You know, I can be talking to 1,000 people, and the social contract is that I am the masculine. The social contract is that I'm the giver and the audience is the receiver. Wouldn't be happening if I wasn't there, but it wouldn't be happening if they weren't there. The masculine gives, the feminine gives back. But I'm very clear that that mentality where I'm centered in what I think will not serve me later that night if I'm with my beloved, because it's a different, he wants to be the man and I want to be the woman, and it's a different psychic mindset. Now, this is the deal. Pat Allen says it takes 30 minutes for the brain to transition. It takes 30 minutes for a woman's brain to transition out of that masculine place to that feminine place. When I'm counseling couples, I refer to it as goddess time. You know, and I used to say to men, when she comes home from work, you can't expect her. She's been in this mode all day, and then she's supposed to come home and she's supposed to make dinner or help with dinner and do all the stuff with the kids with their homework, and then you want her to be a goddess in bed at 10:30 or 11. How's that supposed to work? I said, just give her 30 minutes. It could be yoga, it could be bubble baths, it could be walking through nature, something where she has a chance to move from one mode of brain operation to another. And, you know, it'd be really funny because sometimes men would say to me in counseling sessions, well, why? You know, why does she get that 30 minutes? And what about me? Because you're telling me, you know, take the kids out and play basketball in the driveway or whatever. I said, just trust me, give her goddess time. So these kinds of things are the kinds of, I found that all that Pat Allen information very, very helpful with relationships. But there are so many great books out there. The point being, read up. You know, there's such good material on relationships these days, so that then with the additional work of the spiritual and the let's have mercy on each other and let's forgive each other. You know, this thing about forgiveness also, people make mistakes. The Course in Miracles talks about the difference between a sin and an error. A sin would mean you did something so terrible that you're being sent to hell by God. But you know, a sin is an archery term. It means you missed the mark. The Course in Miracles says, at the deepest level, you cannot sin. Because remember, you cannot do anything to alter the person that God created you to be. You are an innocent child of God. That's who God created you to be. So in the moment when we make mistakes, the real me, when I made a mistake, the real me was not uncreated. So when someone makes a mistake towards you, the real them was not uncreated. It's just that file that was not chosen. In intimate relationships, in marriages and so forth, people make mistakes. And people particularly make mistakes because, once again, intimacy is a learning. Everything's going to come up for you to see, which is your barrier to love, so that you can see, yes, I formed this barrier to love. Maybe I got it from mommy, maybe I got it from daddy, but it doesn't matter where you got it, it's yours now. You're responsible for saying, I own it, I make amends for it, I apologize, and I seek to do better. And also to realize that about another person. One of the things I see with couples is where someone has made a mistake, someone has apologized, but then the other person says, I forgive you, but is constantly watching to see if they're going to do it again. And you know, at a certain point, you have to decide whether or not to forgive someone. You have to decide either you're going to forgive them or you're not. And after a certain point, you have to be willing to create the space for someone to be better. You know, who do we improve around? We improve around people who expect the best of us. And who do we mess up around? We mess up around people who are constantly expecting us to mess up. I knew you were going to do that. You know, it's hard to be yourself around that kind of judgmental energy. So forgiveness is a radical stance, but it's the only way that couples can make it, is if we realize that the fact that it got hard is what the Course in Miracles calls the holyization of a relationship. This is the time, the Course in Miracles says, when we must have faith. This is not the time to turn away from each other. And too many times in relationships today, one person or the other skips out thinking, you know, this isn't working, when actually it's working really well. All the stuff's coming up. And that's the danger and the real tragedy of this culture that we have today, this like tender culture swipe, you know. Next. Sometimes it's like people aren't dating these days, they're auditioning. And such sadness to the heart comes from all this. I remember years ago saying to a therapist, well, there aren't many good men out there or something like that. And I remember her saying, whenever I hear a woman say that, what I hear is contempt for men. And I hear a lot of women express contempt for men on one hand and wondering why I can't find love on the other hand. So I think that sometimes we have to be very careful there. And I also think it's a difficult time for men in our society, a real difficult time for men, because sometimes, you know, it's important to remember there's a divine feminine, but there's also a divine masculine. And on the other hand, we want our guys to be like, you know, they got it going on as men. On the other hand, men are like scared to do anything these days because masculine, what's macho? It's interesting. Let's say a man opening the door for you. And some women will bite a man's head off if he does. I can open the door for myself. Well, can we be real here for a moment? I don't think any man thinks that you can't open the door for yourself. That's not the point. The point is, when he opens the door, you can relax into a more feminine place in your nervous system. That's what it's all about. It's the physicality of it. I always say they carry our suitcases, we carry their issues. Let them sort of handle the outer planes, because you're going to do a lot for them with how you have intuitive abilities to handle the inner planes. You can carry some issues for them. Let them carry some of those outer issues for you.